Has anyone ever told you that women are weak? That they are incapable of violence, and they're just not designed to keep up with the boys? These viewpoints would originate from the same people that determined women did not have the stomach for medicine, the temperament for politics, or the grit to leave the home and make their entrance into the business world. Welcome to Frontline. Currently, there's legislation moving forward in the United States to have women included in any future draft. And despite one being very unlikely today, outside of World War III or a major national disaster, I still wanted to take this moment to highlight and discuss American servicewomen and the historic uphill battle they have faced with their own government, and all just so they can put themselves in harm's way for their country. The most fascinating part is they're still not done fighting today. First, I want to address our video's opening statements and bury them here. These are the ideologies regarding women in combat that can be best summarized into the "they don't have what it takes" category. This mentality often neglects that for decades, women have been restricted from the schools, programs, and opportunities required to test this short-sighted and historically inaccurate argument. Unfortunately, similar cries have been echoed countless times throughout history to invalidate someone outright without first giving them any chance at an equal opportunity. We can easily reference other historic struggles where a group or people had to triumph over similar bigotry, ego, or hate, and we wouldn't even need to leave the military to do it. Color, creed, and someone's personal choices have all had their day of unrelenting bias in the armed forces. Today, this has been removed to such a point where this prejudice would be considered completely unacceptable harassment. I, for one, am more interested in the dedication and commitment shown to achieve a goal, and what the performance data says about someone's effectiveness while achieving it. We'll speak more about that data later, but in my opinion, there's no better indicator for how someone will step up in the future than by looking at how they've done so in the past. And from the birth of America, history has already shown us a clear picture of how strong and capable women have been there, standing shoulder to shoulder with men, even if we didn't know they were there. It is these trailblazers that paved the way to greater rights and equality, and it was on the battlefields of the Revolutionary, Civil, and Spanish Wars where their willingness to assume new and dangerous roles slowly moved them out of the mundane camp duties and placed them square on the battlefield. In these early conflicts, women would be recruited from camp followers and high society alike. They would act as valued spies and smugglers, transporting messages and shadowing enemy troop movements. In these early days, many would risk more than capture and receive less than recognition. In several confirmed examples, many women would simply refuse to be told that the battlefield wasn't their place. Such was the case with the extraordinary story of Margaret Corbin, who was already dressing as a man during the Revolutionary War to fight alongside her husband. When he was violently killed at his cannon, she would become so pissed off that she stopped loading it for the crew and took his place firing it back at the British. She would carry on despite being seriously wounded 3 times throughout the battle, and eventually she survived to become the first woman to earn a military pension and full military honors at her burial many years later. During the Civil War, the U.S. Nursing Corps would launch its prestigious career. This was after General Washington personally witnessed the horrors of war. He would request for the induction of nurses into his army, and this action would cement their increasing status as official caregivers in all future conflicts. Historians can also estimate that at least 1,000 women disguised themselves as men to fight on both sides, and military records can verify that women fought and died in all major battles of the Civil War. Progress towards not having to dress like a man would really get moving in the 20th century. This development would be due to the high attrition rates of both world wars. World War I would mark the first time a woman, who still couldn't vote by the way, would be allowed to openly serve in the US military. Most notably again was the Army Nursing Corps, which was by now well established and growing. They were so in demand in Europe that their placement would move them ever closer to the front lines, where they would begin enduring casualties from enemy fire. Meanwhile, in the US Army Signal Corps, the Hello Girls made international news as enlisted telephone and switchboard operators. These servicewomen were connecting 150,000 calls a day, and they worked only a few kilometers from the trenches of the European front. When America finally decided World War II was a real thing, nearly 350,000 women would go on to serve in uniformed, non-combat roles. The idea here was to free up a man to fight, and this they definitely did. They would expand into the new roles of dedicated drivers, mechanics, lab workers, and cryptologists. They would work as parachute riggers, and apparently we had no problem with them test flying experimental planes. They even trained their male counterparts in air combat tactics. Oh, now you trust me to pack your chute and teach you how to shoot down Jerry? Clearly, the chinks in the argument against having women around combat were beginning to form. In total, 432 American women were killed in the line of service during World War II, and 88 more were taken as prisoners of war. The contributions of enlisted women would no longer be ignored after the World Wars. President Truman would sign the Women's Armed Services Integration Act into law, and this would allow women to serve as full, permanent members of all branches of the armed forces. Notable progress in this era would remove restrictions on promotions, overseas deployments, and certain assignments, like including them later in Cold War fun. Women would join the Korean and Vietnam War effort with poise and dedication. During Korea, they would undertake the new roles of military police officer, air traffic controller, intelligence, and engineers. But still, they would be prevented from directly commanding any male subordinates, or from carrying weapons even as they took casualties abroad. The women's armed services would be held back from Vietnam for nearly a decade until the door was finally opened for 11,000 women, most of whom were volunteer nurses, and these were stationed in-country. As this unpopular war drew to a close, it led to an increasing shortfall of male recruits, and this would kickstart the decision to permit women into the National Guard back at home. Their career choices would again be expanded into all military occupational specialties, but with 48 exceptions. These would be the combat or hazardous duty trades which would remain off-limits. The post-Vietnam years would continue to see a massive disinterest in the military, and this brought women to center stage. Finally, they would be able to command male subordinates as well as enter into previously all-male programs like the Drill Sergeant School and non-commissioned officer programs. The Pentagon would also pull the stick from their ass to announce that pregnant women would no longer be forcibly ejected from their careers in the military.
You will find I am kind.
How nice of them. The next steps would be to include defensive weapons training as mandatory for women. Integrating genders into basic training programs was an easy step after that. As we drew closer to the 21st century, we would continue to witness a wave of firsts for women. There was the first naval fighter and helicopter pilot, first 4-star general, West Point graduate, and the first rescue swimmer in the Coast Guard, and on the list would go. Then, in 1994, old Bill Clinton, ever looking for an opportunity to impress the ladies, would rescind the risk rule, which would allow women to serve in all positions except for direct ground combat roles. Now women could engage in combat as aviators, sailors, and Air Force personnel as long as they did it from a distance. Okay, come with me on a little aside here. This ongoing animosity that surrounds the final combat barrier for women is interesting, and this can be seen debated in studies that link the associated bond of war and men together. In short, this idea is based around how war has, until recently, been advertised as a man's business, and as our society becomes increasingly modern and civilized, how we can develop a psychological resistance, placing women in a situation where they then might return home in body bags. Anyways, then the towers came down on 9/11, and the US entered Iraq and Afghanistan. Here there were no traditional battle lines, no safe space to put these fragile life givers. Women were now being engaged in combat despite their pogue status. The enemy appeared out of the population to strike at will, and seemingly disappeared just as quickly. The combat arms ban seemed meaningless. With blood, sweat, and loss of life, the last hurdle was dragged to the finish line, kicking and screaming. In 2013, the document formally lifting the ban on women in direct combat roles was signed, and 2 years later, their full integration into the armed services took place. This opened all positions and occupations to women without exception. As long as they met the standard, no further barriers would remain in their way. Thousands are currently serving in all ground combat trades. Today's challenges are a little different than their predecessors. The surrounding controversy is over what specific standards women should meet, if they should receive modified entry requirements, and if doing so would cause a dilution of the trades that could affect their warfighting capabilities. Let's look at the Marine Corps, who had the most difficult transition out of all the branches. In 2015, they conducted a study that pitted teams of mixed gender against those consisting of all males. They observed that the mixed gender teams were outperformed nearly 70% of the time by the all-male units in nearly every aspect. To add injury to insult, they found that all female units would receive injuries at more than 6 times the rate of their male colleagues. The Corps didn't offer any specific reason for such a wide discrepancy, but characterized their findings by simply saying there's more to be learned and an opportunity to train and become stronger in a more lethal manner. The military agrees and has vowed repeatedly that no standards will be lowered to make way for women. This, despite some senior generals balking at the practicality of the promise. Early female graduates into the combat arms also want standards to remain high. In addition to seeing any reduction to their entry as insulting, it also cheapens their victory and sets an environment in which they lose respect from their male counterparts. So far, the Army has kept their promise. In 2018, only 2 out of 37 women graduated the Marine Corps Infantry Officer course. But now we have the first woman to lead an infantry platoon. These modern trailblazers are now cheering the latest unrelenting standard from the new Army Combat Fitness Test as a step in the right direction. This test is intended to learn from its predecessor to better measure fitness and combat readiness. Even after witnessing a 54% fail rate among female recruits, experienced women with combat deployments would come forward to say that reverting back to gendered standards would hurt the image of women in the combat arms, while also sacrificing efficiency of their unit. My own experience with women in the military has been overwhelmingly positive, and I expect these percentages to continue to rise each year. With that said, if only 46% of recruits have what it takes to meet the standard, then so be it. Sacrificing training standards in an attempt to please the public or policymakers is not a solution for any soldiers on the battlefield. The best solution is to maintain the standards that achieve maximum efficiency and survivability in our modern theaters of war. The women and men who want to serve their country with rifles in hand will put in the work to meet us there on terms they can be proud of. Their predecessors have certainly been doing so already.
When they came to me and said, here are your job options, you can pick anyone you'd like, and I asked how come there wasn't a bigger female to male ratio in the infantry, and they said, because women just can't. And I said, sign me up.